So does anyone remember any points from yesterday's session? Anything? Thank you. Any points? I am okay. Are we starting this or what? Oh, this is starting. Okay, what was I am? Hmm. Yes, thank you. Yes. So when somebody does something that hurts us, say for example, a doctor gives a medicine to a patient, and the patient's condition worsens. So there is some side effect of the medication. Now, what was the cause actually? Is it that the doctor didn't know about the medication side effects? Maybe it was published in some obscure paper and nobody knows about it. It could be ignorance. Or maybe the doctor didn't think about it. Doctor didn't connect that this patient has this particular case history and this medicine could lead to that effect. That could be incompetence. Or you could say the doctor is ill motivated or deliberately wanted to complicate the patient's disease so that the doctor would be able to make more money by hurting the patient, or the doctor was maybe bribed by the patient's enemies so that they could hurt or kill the patient, something like that. So ignorance, incompetence, malevolence. So it's best to start with the least negative explanation. That is the meaning of giving the benefit of the doubt. Yes, thank you. Any other points? Yes, please. Okay, 3 stakeholders. So whenever anything wrong is done, at that time, who are the 3 stakeholders? Yes, excellent. So victim. So victimizer and society, correct. Okay. So I thought I was going to be the victim today, and I was wondering who will be the victimizer. the projector is starting off now. So what are the 3 ways in which things are to be dealt with? What should be victim be offered? Reparation. Yeah, something. Okay, something bad has happened to you. So some indication, some gesture that some compensation, reparation. Then for the victimizer, this has to start from restriction. It can go to retribution. But the best result is, the ultimate best result is what? Yes, rectification, that the person corrects themselves. And for the rest of society, regulation. So we discussed a key point about forgiveness at the start. Does anyone remember that point? Anyone? What forgiveness? Yeah. So forgiveness is it's an individual. Is it visible now? Okay, good. So it is a individual virtue, as it is very good at that way. But what it cannot be always yes, it cannot be the default state policy. That by default we'll forgive everyone. The state has a different responsibility. That is to maintain order in society. And sometimes wrongdoers have to be punished. So now in that connection, yesterday we discussed the story of Vali and Sugriv, and how both were subjected to misunderstandings. And then both, based on the misunderstanding, made a wrong action. But Vali became very vindictive and decided to go out and try to kill Sugriv. Now, so yesterday several questions came up about the point of when something should be forgiven and when something should not be forgiven. So we will talk about 3 kinds of wrongdoings today. But before we do that, let's try to get a broad picture of what exactly happens. See, whenever there is a wrongdoing, now again we could say that there is the person, then there is the person, then there is their conditioning. Conditioning is everybody has a particular kind of conditioning in life. And then there is their circumstance, the situation that they are in. Say somebody is, for example, an alcoholic. And then they find themselves in a party where there is a lot of drinks. That's a circumstance. So the alcoholism is the conditioning that is there inside them. They are drunk before, and that's a conditioning inside them. And the circumstances, they find themselves in maybe for their work they have to go to a party where there are a lot of drinks. Or say somebody by conditioning is a short-tempered person. And then by circumstance they are put in a team where they have a very incompetent person in their team. And that person keeps making mistakes. So broadly speaking, whenever any mistake occurs, so if we consider the whenever any mistake, or here we're talking about more of a misdeed, somebody does something wrong. So ultimately, all three, the circumstances alone don't act. The conditioning alone doesn't act. The soul also is involved. Soul gives consciousness. But broadly speaking, we can say, in one sense, the initiator could be the initiator could be the circumstance, the initiator could be the conditioning, or the initiator could be the person. So these three wrongdoings, accordingly we call them as circumstantial wrongdoing. Then there is the red color visible or no? Not very clearly? It's clear, okay. Then there is conditional, and then there is calculational, or you could call it intentional. So basically, when a person is doing something wrong, sometimes even the best of people can be caught in bad circumstances. And the circumstances can make the person do something which is hurtful, something which is terrible. Now we can say circumstances don't make anyone do anything. It's the person who does. Well, that is true, but sometimes a person can be caught in a bad circumstance. Say, for example, somebody is very honest, but then very honest and upstanding, but then there's a big crisis in their family. Maybe their child is terribly sick and they need money for a treatment. And then they go to a place where maybe they go to some office or somebody's home, and that person has kept the treasury or their money chest open. That person just sneaks in and takes the money from there. Now that's not something which they would normally do. But in that circumstance, under the circumstances, they end up doing it. So that is circumstantial wrongdoing. That means primarily it is impelled by the circumstance. So we could consider, and we will be discussing this story a little more again later also, but say when Sugriva forgot his vow or forgot his promise to Ram to assist him, that was largely circumstantial. He had been living in exile for a long time, and suddenly he was back in the kingdom with access to all the comforts and pleasures and luxuries that he had not had for a long time. And then because of the rainy season, there's nothing to do for him. So it's like our job is locked down, we can't go out of home, and we have unrestricted access to Netflix. There, the person will just binge on watching movies after movie after movie. So it was circumstantial. So it was a wrong action, but Sugriv never repeated that again after that. So basically, whenever there is a wrongdoing, after that, so this table we will expand more and more over the next 2 sessions. But at this stage, let's see. There is, after wrongdoing, there is regret internally. And then there is reform externally. Are these 2 things happening? This is what we need to consider. So I'll fill in the details gradually. But here, when the wrong is circumstantial, so do you think there is regret at that time? Yes, there is regret, isn't it? And is there reform? Yes. I'm not going to let myself be trapped in such situations. Even if I'm trapped, I'm not going to do this again. On the other hand, if we consider the opposite is calculational or intentional wrongdoing. When the wrongdoing is intentional, say for example, Duryodhan tried to destroy the Pandavas. How many times did Duryodhan try to destroy the Pandavas? Sorry? Many times. Okay, what are the first attempt? Tried to poison Bhima, right? And then second was? Sorry? Lakshagraha, okay. House of Lack. I heard Lakshman Rekha. That's one thing, okay. Okay. So, he tried to. So, now, when the Pandavas survived and they came back, did Duryodhan regret his actions? Yeah, he regretted. He regretted that his plan didn't succeed. So his regret was not that I did something wrong. His regret was that, the wrong that I did not do it well enough, or the person whom I trusted, Purochan, he was foolish enough, he let the Pandavas escape. So here there is no regret. And is there any reform? No, there is no regret and there is no reform. Now, in between these 2 is conditional wrongdoing. Conditional means it is because of conditionings. Now, in this is a peculiar case where there is regret, but there is no reform. The person feels, what I did was wrong. But because the conditioning is so strong, they are not able to stop doing it. They're not able to give it up. Now, from the conditional wrongdoing, can a person recover? Yeah, the person can go up, or the person can go down. Go up means they can completely go beyond wrongdoing, or they can go down also. But the point is that sometimes there are people who have certain conditionings. Prabhupada told the story of the kleptomaniac, the person who is a compulsive robber. So he went to a holy place, and in the holy place, everybody was sleeping at night, he had the urge to rob. So he went and pilfered through everybody's belongings. He thought, no, I'm in a holy place. I should not rob. But I just couldn't stop. So what he did was, he took things from one person's belongings and put them in another person's belongings. And he took them from another person's belongings and put a third person's belongings. And everybody started claiming, my things are stolen, my things are stolen. And he said, I'm sorry, I had this conditioning. I had to steal. But I didn't want to steal. So I stole from one and I have kept everything here itself. So nothing is lost. So, like some people may have a conditioning because they just can't stop doing it. So basically, these are the broad 3 categories. Now, now going back to our yesterday's discussion about forgiving and punishing. So if somebody is a circumstantial wrongdoer, what should be done to them? Yes, forgive them. Now, of course, whenever we do something wrong, we will always try to believe that it is a circumstantial wrong. Forgive me for it. And if somebody is calculational or intentional, I'm deliberately using the word calculational because a person can have intention, but when a person does calculation, that requires like a certain level of premeditation. So at that time, what is required? That time forgiving will not work. And we'll discuss why. But here, punishment is required. Now, while a person, now, generally whenever any kind of categorization we do, categorization is like mapping. So on the globe, we can put like a map. This is America, this is Canada. And they can seem to be neat lines. But in real life, if you go to the border, there may not be a neat border saying this is Canada, this is America. And even if you say this river marks the border, but then what does it mean? There's the border exactly in the half of the river. I mean, this side of the river belongs to this much water of the water belongs to America, this much belongs to Canada. Borders are not always very neat. So we need to know that categorization or any kind of conceptual classification, any kind of categorization or classification that we do, it's like a map. And there will always be nuances in it. It's a useful tool, but it is not to be absolutized. So like on the India-Bangladesh border, it is considered to be one of the world's most complicated borders. Because what happens is, inside Bangladesh, there are at least it was considered to some time ago, that inside Bangladesh, there are certain areas which belong to India. And inside those areas which belong to India, there are certain areas which belong to Bangladesh. And finally, there was some trading of the areas, and finally the border was made a little more neat. So why am I talking about this? Here that in real life, where a particular wrong falls, it may be a little more difficult to determine. But having a map helps. Now the map, so when we have a map, it's important to remember the map is not the territory. And similarly, categories or classification, categories don't equal with people. We are not meant to simply put people into boxes, but it's a tool to use to understand. Sometimes the same person might be a circumstantial wrongdoer initially, but they may go down and they may degenerate. So, for example, if we consider the story of Ajamil. Now, was Ajamil's, if you look at these three categorization, was Ajamil's wrong? Was it circumstantial or conditional or intentional? Sorry? Yes, if you look at Ajamil's wrong, we could say wrongdoing, it certainly started as circumstantial. In the sense that he was just going around his normal life. And then suddenly he saw something. He saw a man and a woman doing some explicit activities in public. And seeing that sight started replaying in his mind. Now it was not he had gone out to do something like this, see something like that, it was circumstantial. But then eventually the subsequent things that he did, we could even say that the sight was circumstantial. Then we can even say that later on, when that memory kept replaying in his mind and he felt a strong craving, he went to that particular woman and he was with her. Now that could also be, that we could say the first fall. That could be said to be circumstantial. I mean, let's be charitable over here. It's not necessarily. But eventually, when he comes back, and then he throws out his own chaste wife, he abandons his parents, he brings that woman to his place, and then he gives up his Brahmin activities and starts robbing and plundering people. So by the end, when he is doing crime, by that time it has definitely become intentional, isn't it? There is some time when an urge comes, sometimes the urge is so strong it doesn't allow us to think. But that urge with the same strength does not stay for days and weeks and months. The urge comes for some time, it stays and then it goes. So when he is going to do all these things, it is basically not circumstantial. it goes down to intentional. So we'll discuss this a little bit more later. But this principle of something going from circumstantial to intentional. Let's now come back to the story of Vali and Sugriv. So yesterday, we'll discuss this degeneration, how some wrong goes down from circumstantial to intentional. So yesterday we stopped at the point when Vali felt that Sugriv had betrayed him. Sugriv had tried to kill him. And so he decided that I have to punish him. And when he decided to punish him, he set off in trying to kill him, his own brother. And his brother had to flee. He fled all over. Went to this part and that part and hid here in this cave and hid in that forest and hid on top of that mountain. But wherever he would go, Vali would sooner or later find him. And Sugriv lived in constant fear, knowing that at any moment he would be attacked and he would have to escape. And he searched all over earth. He couldn't find any safe place. Till he found a safe place right next to Vali's kingdom itself, in the vicinity of Matanga Rishi's ashram. Remember I told the story yesterday about how Matanga Rishi had cursed Vali that if he came in the vicinity of his hermitage, he would fall dead. So there Sugriv got a safe shelter, a sanctuary. Now this further enraged Vali. It's like the person whom he wants to destroy is right near him, close to him, and he can't do anything to him. It's like if we feel that somebody has wronged us, and then somehow that person is beyond our power to do anything about, then that fills a person with rage. I was giving this class in Singapore, and after that one devotee came and he told me, this is exactly how China feels about Taiwan. Well, maybe not all of China, but it's like right next to them, but they're not able to conquer because America is supporting and so many other things are going on. So I'm not making a geopolitical judgment over here, but it's a parallel. So Sugriv, Vali felt enraged and he felt that I have to get back at him some way or the other. And this is where he did something that just spelled the ruin of their relationship. There are many relationships when different people, we all make mistakes and sometimes our anger goes to a great degree. But in any relationship, there are certain boundaries. If they are violated, then there is no hope practically for the recovery of that relationship. So he said that if I cannot get back at him, I will get back at him by getting back at someone close to him. So when Ali had attacked Sugriv and Sugriv had fled, Sugriv had left his wife Ruma behind in his kingdom. And then Vali decided that I will take Ruma for myself. And when he did this was a horrible thing to do. A few months ago, if anybody had told Vali that he would ever do something to his own sister-in-law, he was the elder brother, so sister-in-law is like younger brother, is like often like the son. So she's basically like his daughter-in-law. He would have been disgusted at the very idea. But now he ended up doing this. And later on, when Ram heard the story of what Sugriv told, it is when Ram heard this, at the time he said, Sugriv needs to be punished. Sorry. When Sugriv told the story to Ram, Ram decided Vali needs to be punished. So how did this happen? So clearly, his deciding to take Ruma for himself, that cannot be called circumstantial. That is a calculatedly cold-blooded move. So let's try to see how this happens. So when we are talking about this, balancing forgiveness and justice, we are also going towards various directions. So here we are trying to understand how a circumstantial wrongdoing can go down to becoming an intentional wrongdoing. So I'll explain this using an acronym, AIDS. So that's like AIDS is a terrible disease. So basically this is how our own mentality can become diseased. So basically the first is arrogance. By arrogance means what? That I am right. My judgment is right. Anybody who is successful in any way in life, they to some extent always have to have some confidence. Otherwise they would not be successful. And Wali was a successful and powerful king. So it is that anybody who is successful, they trust their judgment, because it is their judgment that has got them to a particular level in life. But there is confidence and there is overconfidence or arrogance. Arrogance means I am right, I cannot be wrong. My judgment has to be right. So what is the difference between the two of them? The difference is primarily in vigilance. Vigilance means I am vigilant to evaluate. Maybe my judgment might not be right. Just because my judgment was right in the past, that does not mean it will always be right. So what was his arrogance over here? He was a very powerful king, and when he made that judgment that Sugriv has betrayed me, then he just stuck to that. So the word arrogance, where I'm using it here, it can mean many different things. We use pride, dambho, darpo, abhimanascha. Krishna talks about that. So arrogance means basically the idea that I cannot be wrong. So one way to know if we are arrogant, if our ego has become unbearable, is to see if the taste of apologizing is unbearable for us. Some people, for them to say, I'm wrong, I was wrong, I'm sorry, that is more difficult than drinking 1 liter of Karela juice. I can't do it. It's just like their lips get sealed and those words can't escape from the lips. I'm sorry. And some people may say it, but they don't mean it. Like some people say, I'm sorry. And afterwards, somebody else say, I'm really sorry that I said sorry. So they just say it as a ritual, as a perfunctory thing. But the first is arrogance. I have a excessive certainty, like say absolute almost certainty that I am right. Then after that is, because of that, there's inconsiderateness. So in this case, is inconsiderate for Sugriva. He could have allowed Sugriva to at least tell his side of the story. But now inconsiderateness, so here arrogance, many people have arrogance in the world. It is unfortunate, but it's not a terrible thing. It's just like some people are successful and their success gets to their head. Just arrogance does not mean that person has become criminal. It doesn't mean necessarily that person has become a bad person. That person may not be a very pleasant person to be with. That person may not be a very pleasant person to work with. But that doesn't make them a bad person. But after arrogance comes inconsiderateness, okay? So he could have, this inconsiderateness was towards Sugriva. Now we could say that Wali and Sugriv were in similar situations, but for Sugriv, there had not been much of a chance to actually inquire what has actually happened. Because if Wali had been killed as he suspected, as he inferred, then not only his own life was in danger, but even the kingdom was in danger. Now, on the other hand, Wali was much more powerful than Sugriv. So when Sugriv had run away, Wali was not only on the throne now, Wali had the power of the kingdom with him. So Sugriv couldn't have really done much to him. So at least one time he could have given Sugriv an opportunity to hear, to speak. Okay, tell me, how could you have done like this? What were you thinking? So generally, whenever somebody hurts us, at that time, it's very painful for us. But even if people's actions are not acceptable for us, but at least if you try to understand what were you thinking when you did this, then at least their reasoning becomes understandable for us. So we'll come back to this point later more. But inconsiderateness means we don't hear that other person's story also. But then after that is dismissiveness. The dismissiveness was towards the courtiers, was towards Tara. So they told, actually there's a misunderstanding. Sugriv thought that you had been killed. So he said, no, you all were fools. You believed his story. So just dismiss their side of the story. Generally speaking, see, when two people have a conflict, it's just natural that we feel that we are right and the other person is wrong. Or at least, okay, I may be wrong, but I am wrong 10% and that person is wrong 90%. It's natural to feel like that. And I'm not saying this is just because of ego. It is when a conflict occurs, at that time, the hurt, the emotions, they all work in such a way that they cloud our judgment. And we strongly feel that way at that time. But then, after that, what happens? If there are some other people, some third person, this is maybe there's some fault of yours also over here. Then, are we ready to consider that? If we dismiss, then that is where things start going terribly wrong. So his dismissiveness, like anybody who does not support my side of the story, that person is evil. That person is bad. That person is against me. So when there's this dismissiveness, basically there is like a very firm black and white. Like when 20 years ago, there was an American president who declared, he said, we have a war on terror. It says, if you are not for the war on terror, then you are for terror. Well, not necessarily. That there could be somebody who says, we are against terror, but maybe a war against an entire country may not be the best way to fight against terror. So basically, when there is this dismissiveness, things are made very black and white. That if you are not for me, then you are foolish. You are a terrible person. This is where a person becomes very isolated. I alone am right and everybody else is wrong. And then after that is the worst thing. After that, what comes is self-righteousness. Self-righteousness means I am so right that to pursue what I think is right, whatever I do will be right. That's when a person is self-righteous, the other person is so bad that whatever I do to punish the other person, that is good enough. So when a person becomes self-righteous, that's when their moral sense gets not only disoriented, it almost gets destroyed. This is when there is a group bias. So one group of people may just go and kill even innocent civilians in the other group of people. Why? You belong to that group. By belonging to that group itself, you are an evil person. And therefore, you need to be destroyed. So when a person becomes self-righteous, see, to be righteous is to be virtuous. But to be self-righteous basically means what at this stage? It's like my ends are so right. The ends that I am pursuing are so right that any means become right for that. Because what I am doing is so good that any means that I may pursue for doing that, that's perfectly okay. So one of my friends has done is PhD in terrorism. It's a terror. It's not terrorism, it's radicalization. So how people become radicalized, and these people who become radicalized, at one time they just, many of them, it's not that they were they're born as demons with horns coming out of their head or something like that. They're ordinary people. But those ordinary people, they come to a point where they delight, they consider a big success when they blow up innocent people, including women and children, and they feel joy over there. So what happens? That is the stage of being self-righteous, where a person starts thinking that because my ends are so justified, that any means become justified. Those people, they have done such harm to us, whatever we do to destroy those people, that's perfectly fine. So this is where Wali came to this level of self-righteousness. Now this same sequence we can actually see in various places where some wrong is done. Say for example, we consider Kaikai. How did it happen? The same sequence. Kaikai, she was poisoned by Manthara, and that is true, but it was Kaikai who took the action forward. So okay, now I have understood what is going on. Manthara has enlightened me. So my judgment is right, that there is a conspiracy afoot to try to take my son's rights away. My son's rights away. And then her inconsiderateness was towards Dashrath. Okay, Dashrath had treated her as his favorite queen. And if there was some conspiracy like this, at the very least, she could have gone and asked Dashrath, what's happening? Why is the ceremony being done? Why the haste in doing this? But she just didn't ask him at all. Then after that, she didn't even ask Dashrath. She could have gone to somebody else, like Vashishta Muni. Not Vashishta Muni was who was the Raj Rishi over there. Not Raj Rishi, the Kulaguru over there for their family, the dynastic sage. And now for him, there were no, he might have said, even if she thought that, okay, Dashrath, he's come under the clutches of Kaushalya. So okay, but Vashishta Muni had no axe to grind over there. Whether Bharat became the king or Ram became the king, Vashishta's post was secure. Vashishta would still continue to be the guru of their family. She could ask Vashishta. Even Vashishta implored her afterwards, don't do this. He dismissed it. And then she continued it, what was her thinking? That Bharat deserves the kingdom. And I am doing all this for Bharat's interests. So her self-righteousness was, nobody's understanding. They're thinking I'm selfish, I'm cold-blooded. No. But actually I am doing all this for my son. I'm protecting his interests. And even if the world misunderstands me, I will do whatever it takes to protect my son's interests. That's how she justified what she was doing. It is only when Bharat came, and Bharat was shocked and expressed his horror and disgust at what she had done. That's when her illusion was dispelled. And then she realized what she had done. So basically, when somebody starts going down this track, into circumstantial wrongdoer, they go down to becoming an intentional wrongdoer. It happens generally when, everybody, when they do something wrong, there is something inside them tells them, maybe this is wrong. But then they silence that voice. And they come up with some reason to silence that voice. Some way by which they silence that voice. So that is where the self-righteousness comes in. And at that time, it's very, very difficult for that person to recover. So now, when Wali went down this track, that is when he doomed his fate. So we all can, as I said, we all have some success in our life. So we all have certain confidence in our judgment. And that confidence can go towards arrogance. So each of these steps, we will discuss now briefly. Does anyone remember the 4 steps? Arrogance, okay. Then? Inconsiderateness. So arrogance is, I am right. Inconsiderateness is, I don't care for your side of the story. Dismissiveness is, Anyone who disagrees with me is a fool. Anyone who so, and then last is self-righteousness, where whatever I do, my cause is so right that I can do anything to pursue it. Hmm. So each of these stages can be countered. So here, we'll briefly discuss this now. If we get time, we'll come back in the fourth session to discuss this point again. But the cure for arrogance, the way to avoid arrogance, now we could say it is humility, but more that it is open-mindedness. That maybe my judgment might not be right. And we arrive at a situation not with the conclusion that my assessment is right, but be a little open-minded. If we come back to this, we'll, as I said, reflect on this later. But in considerateness, this is where there's a basic level of respect. Now here when I talk about it, it's just not even respect, it's just courtesy. That, okay, if I believe that, I believe this is what you have done, it's a common courtesy to ask other, okay, oh, why did you do this? What were you thinking? Now when you talk about dismissiveness, that's where this is where, where really things become challenging. So all this, now what we're talking about solutions is, it has to work beforehand. Those are virtues that need to be cultivated. That instead of being, this is where you could say, one needs a certain level of humility. That maybe I might not be wrong. Maybe that others may also have something of value. So here I'm using the word humility almost in the sense of curiosity. See, what do I mean by curiosity over here? That in any situation, there are things I know and there are things I don't know. Nobody can say that I know everything about a situation. So if you can just accept that the things I don't know may be more important than what I do know. So that is basically humility, which is a sense of curiosity. Okay, if others are saying something about this, let me just hear about what they're saying. And the last point is, everyone needs to have some non-negotiable boundaries. See, when a person becomes self-righteous, then any boundary becomes negotiable for them. No matter what anybody does, okay, that person acted terribly toward me, but that person is not going to force me, or that person is not going to make me stoop down to their level. Or say somebody gets angry and starts using foul words against us. Now, their foul words are shocking, but that does not mean that we give up our politeness or decency of speech and we start using foul words against them. So each of us, we have certain boundaries. So overall, when this degeneration happens, even good people can do terrible things. Generally, good people will do good things, bad people will do bad things. But this is a sequence by which good people can do bad things. Good people can end up doing terrible things, where it's like completely that person is caught in their own worldview, where nobody has no alternative idea has any entrance. There's a this famous atheist who said that, good people will do good things, bad people will do bad things. But for good people to do bad things, it takes religion. He was talking about religious fanaticism. But actually, it's not just religion. It's any kind of indoctrination. It's any kind of isolationist worldview. See, when the religion becomes fanatical, essentially what happens is that it doesn't care for any other view at all. So whenever there's any isolationist worldview, I alone am right. That can make a good person also do terrible things. So we discussed the story of Vali and Sugriv because in one sense, Ravan was always a bad person. But Wali was a good person who did a bad thing, and then he continued doing those bad things. So Wali's redemption arc, that what happened to him afterwards, and how Lord Ram dealt with him. Generally, it is thought that Lord Ram killed Wali unfairly. But how it was, whether it was unfair, how it was not unfair, that we will discuss in tomorrow's session. But actually, while Wali was killed by Ram's arrow, and Ravan was also killed by Ram's arrow, there's a universe of difference between both of them. And that universe of difference becomes evident toward the conclusion of that particular pastime. After Wali falls, there's a discussion between both of them. So what is that discussion and what it implies? That we'll discuss in tomorrow's session. And lastly, in the last session which we'll be discussing, where we'll talk about this conditional. So I talked about intentional wrongdoings, circumstantial wrongdoings. Calculational, and so there are two extremes, but in between is conditional wrongdoings. So conditional wrongdoings, when they happen because of conditioning, when a person keeps doing wrong, how can that person be dealt with? Because that is something which they're keeping doing the wrong things. So can they just be forgiven, or should they just be punished, or is there something in between that can be done? That we'll discuss in the last session. Okay, so I'll summarize what we discussed today. So broadly speaking, we discussed 3 main points. The first was 3 kinds of wrongdoings. Does anyone remember the 3 kinds of wrongdoings? Circumstantial, conditional, calculation. Calculational means intentional. So what is the difference between them in terms of regret and reform? In circumstantial, what happens? Sorry? Is there regret? Yes. Is there reform? Yes. Yes. Then in calculational, regret? The reform? Not there, okay. In conditional, regret is there, but reform is not there. The person keeps doing the same thing again and again. So, now when I use the word conditional, conditional can be adjective for condition also, but we are not talking about condition, we are talking about conditionings. So generally, those who have done wrong because of circumstances, what is to be done with them? Forgive them. Those who are calculational, they need to be punished. And then we discussed how a person can go down this trajectory from, well, somebody might do a circumstantial wrong, but they might end up doing an intentional wrong. So now, one point we discussed is that whenever you do any categorization or classification, in concept it is black and white, it is clear stages, but in real life there are always nuances. But broadly, what are the 4 stages we discussed? What is the acronym? AIDS, okay. So, A was? Arrogance. Basically, one way to remember this is, say, if you consider a person is here, this is the wrongdoer. And then around them, there are, say, other people. So, here there is arrogance is, I am right. This is arrogance. So, I don't care for your opinion. So, I don't care for your side of the story. That is what? Arrogance. That is inconsiderateness. And then, this says, like, if you disagree with me, you are wrong. You don't need to be I don't even need to hear you. This is dismissiveness. And then finally, then whatever I do to hurt you, that is right. That is self-righteousness. So basically, there are the 4 stages by which a person may degenerate. And then we also discussed briefly, the last part was how does one, so we discussed multiple examples of degeneration, like Ajamil, which are 3 examples we discussed. Ajamil, then second example, Wali, and third was Kaikai, yes. So with this, then we discuss a solution for arrogance. A person can be at least somewhat open-minded. That, okay, when I arrive into a situation, maybe there's more to know than what I know. Inconsiderateness is just have basic respect in terms of courtesy. And dismissiveness, there is humility in the sense of just curiosity. Okay, if people don't agree with me, maybe they know something about which I don't know. And then last is boundaries, or non-negotiable boundaries. That no matter what happens, there are certain things which I am not going to do. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for the wonderful class. One question based on Maharaj's lecture about Prahlad. He is, even though Hiranyakashipu is intentional, Prahlad is always forgiving and he keeps repeating it. And he just Mare Krishna Rake Krishna Mare Ke. So he just leaving everything to Krishna to take care of him. Is that a good strategy?
Well, it's Prahlad's strategy. How can it be a bad strategy? Yeah, it's a good strategy, but is it a universal principle? That's the question. They're 2 different things. That there are different modes in which we can express our devotion and our surrender to Krishna. That means that if we consider, say, the epitome of surrender, the classic example of surrender is Draupadi. Surrender means she raises her hands, Krishna, you protect me. Now, there are some retellings of the Mahabharata which say that, as long as Draupadi was trying to hold on to her sari, Krishna did not come. It is only when she stopped trying that Krishna came. Now, this is not said in the Mahabharata originally. And there is a particular principle which is fine over here, that, we need to depend on Krishna. But it does not mean that all that Draupadi was doing before that was wrong. When the whole assembly was going towards adharma, she tried fervently to stop that adharma. So her attempts to defend her modesty, to protect herself as well as to protect the assembly from adharma, that cannot be seen simply as her lack of surrender. Isn't it? So when things are in our control, we have to do what we need to do. But sometimes things just go beyond our control. So now if we consider, in fact later on Krishna, when Draupadi and Krishna meet in the forest after they have been exiled, so Krishna tells Draupadi that, I have heard how while the whole assembly was hurtling towards adharma, you were the only person who tried to remind everyone about dharma. Oh Draupadi, your actions are laudable. Your tears will never go in vain. So it's not that our endeavors are not to be done. So let's go the other extreme, we could say, or other example. Krishna tells that Arjuna at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, surrender to me. Sarva dharman parityajya. And Arjuna says, yes, I'll surrender to you. Karishye vachanam tava. That's 1873. But then what is Arjuna's surrender? Draupadi's surrender was to raise her arms. Arjuna's surrender was to raise his arms. His arms were his weapons. So basically, surrender can happen in many different ways. Put it this way, that Surrender basically means harmony with God's will. But it doesn't mean that, say, there's one vision of our relationship with God is that we are here and Krishna is up here. That is true. But there is another vision that say we are here and Krishna is everywhere. We are also parts of Krishna. We are not Krishna, but we are parts of Krishna. So God's will can happen to us. To us means God is doing will is like this. No, God, something is happening to me. That is God's will. But God's will can also happen through us. That means God wants me to do something for him. So in Draupadi's case, when Draupadi raised her hand, it was whatever is happening, Krishna, I accept that. But in Arjuna's case, surrender meant Krishna wanted Arjuna to do something. Krishna wanted Arjuna to take up his weapons and fight. So Prahlad's is one way of surrender. But that is not the only way of surrender. It depends on what role the Lord wants whom to play at what time. So for Arjuna, the role was he wanted him to fight. So generally, the principles of bhakti are universal. At the same time, they are taught at particular times with particular emphasis. Say if some young devotee has lost his job and maybe their relationship has broken down, and that young devotee says, okay, I'll just go to Vrindavan, sit under a tree and chant 128 rounds every day. We may say, okay, there's no need to get frustrated like this. You stay here, try to stay in association, do some service, and gradually things will become better. But say if somebody has been diagnosed with terminal cancer and they have only a few days to live, and they say, okay, I want to do this temple management and I want to do this and do that. Okay, no, this is the time you go to Vrindavan. You focus on Krishna, isn't it? So my point is that the same principles of bhakti can be applied in different ways at different times. So the Bhagavatam is spoken to a person, Parikshit Maharaj, who has been cursed to die and who has chosen to accept that curse. His acceptance is glorious, but that is a decision he himself made. Now Shukdev Goswami, throughout the Bhagavatam, tells stories that will reinforce his decision. So in general, most of the stories in the Bhagavatam are about turning away from the world towards the Lord. Not all of them, most of them. So that's why in most of the situations, the characters don't react, the characters don't retaliate. But is that the only way to act? Krishna did not tell Arjuna, oh, the Kauravas are doing wrong, let them keep doing wrong. No, he just told him, you have to fight against them. So the strategy it's glorious, but strategy does not make a universal principle. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So my question was related to forgiveness. So when somebody has done wrong act towards us, we might want to forgive that person, but sometimes it becomes so difficult because the person is around us. So like at that point of time, forgetting the action that has been done, wrong action, it becomes very difficult. And in English it says that we should forgive, but we should not forget. So in that sense, how to develop the strength to forgive that person?
Okay. So actually this was largely this topic I was going to discuss in the last session, where we were going to discuss more about the way Lord Ram dealt with Vali and the way the Lord dealt with Kaikai. There's a difference, and why the difference. So, but suffice it to say that there are two distinct things over here. One is that how we deal with that particular person. And the second is how we pursue what is important in our life. Mm. That means that our purpose is to be, say, as devotees, it is to be Krishna conscious. If somebody, even if somebody is not a devotee, then it is ideally to be dharma conscious, to be there responsible. Okay, this is what I want to do in my life. This is what is important for me. And then, based on that, we have to see how is this person's actions affecting me. If that person's actions are suffocating me so much that I just can't function, then I have to take some action. So somebody may say we should always forgive. Yeah, we should forgive, but it is different people may be wounded to different degrees, and it's not just that they're wounded. How much is the wound impeding their actions? Mm. So how can they resume their life? How can they move forward? That is the more important thing. So in bhakti, is forgiving a virtue? Of course it's a virtue. But forgiving is not the supreme value. It is a supreme virtue. Bhakti, our service to Krishna, is the supreme value. So if some person has hurt us so much, and if they're just seeing them is agitating them, then agitating us, and we just feel we can't forgive, then that means we need to create some distance from them. So basically it's like, so all that I was saying here, let me try to depict it. So if this is my consciousness, now I want to fill my consciousness with Krishna. Krishna is my Lord and I want to serve him. That's what we want it to be. But sometimes what happens is that if this is my consciousness, then if somebody has hurt me, that hurt fills my consciousness. And then I may say all the philosophy, I may know all the philosophy, but somehow I'm just not able to be Krishna conscious. So if that is happening, then now the wound that is there inside, so this particular thought of that person that arises, that is not just because that person is there outside, it's also because there's a wound inside us. Now, the wound inside will take its own time to cure. We want it to be cured, no doubt. But the wound inside will take its own time to cure. So, when this hurt, it is becoming too big, at that time, basically this hurt is triggered, you could say. The hurt is triggered the hurt is triggered internally by some impressions that are there inside us. Say some impressions are there. And then it's triggered externally by the perception of that person. So the impressions will take their own time to heal. It's like, that we live constantly with our memories. And that's why it's so important that we cultivate memories that are worth living with. We cultivate memories whose company we can enjoy, we can be happy with. But if there are some very unpleasant memories that are there, we can't just wish away those memories. We need to create fresh memories which will override those memories. So then during that period, at least what we need to create is, create some boundary. So maybe for some time, maybe I cannot do a service where I'm constantly going to see this person. Maybe I can relocate to some place or at least move to some area where the perception doesn't happen. Krishna also says, Tasmat tvam indriyanyadau niyamya bharatarshava. Krishna says, yes, the problem is inside. But Krishna says, the solution has to generally be an outside-in approach. Now, it cannot be only outside. We cannot just be avoiding the person for the rest of our life. But that avoidance, that minimization of the perception allows healing to take place. So during this time, what we try to do is, basically we try to do more devotional activities by which gradually what happens is that new devotional impressions are created and new memories are created. And then even if that hurt is there, and even if the impressions of those hurt are there, they go deep inside. Now they just get buried inside and they are lost, or are not buried or deep inside. Let's say they get overwritten, so that they don't affect us so much. So that's why sometimes if you're not able to forgive, we don't have to be too hard with ourselves. That doesn't mean we have to go and take revenge. It just means that, okay, wounds will take time to heal, so keep a distance. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, please. There's a question here. No, how did the mic come there? You had a question? Oh, then let's take the question first. No, okay. Actually, it should tasmattam indriyanyado. Wherever the mic is, that's where the question should be. Okay, anyway, go ahead.
Speak closer to the mic. Okay, thank you. So you were saying that we should override it with good devotional memories, right? So what I'm thinking is that if we, don't address it for long, we might be oppressing the memories and it might come back.
Agreed.
Right?
Agreed. So that's what I'm saying, that there's a time for it.
Yeah.
There is a time when we need to address the memories. And generally, it's not immediately. Like yesterday I said that if anger, with passage of time, it can become cool, but with passage of too much time, it can also become cold. So it needs to be addressed. But just like say, if somebody's got a fracture, the first stage is put the hand in a sling. Don't move the hand. The second stage is exactly opposite. Now start moving the hand. Now if a child is told like that, hey, the doctor, make up your mind. Do you want me to not move my hand or move my hand? Isn't it? No, there are different stages. So similarly, generally speaking, when some wound is there, emotional wound is there, when the wound is too fresh, we are too close to it to actually be able to process it, to address it. So now, do we need to address it? Of course, we need to. And how, depending on that particular memory, we may have to decide that. But in a particular situation. But in general, trying to address it immediately only leads it to basically that memory taking us over and dominating us again. There is basically, if you consider the past, so there is lamenting about the past. Now if lamenting is continued, that can go further to living in the past itself. Lamenting at least occasional, living is perpetual. But what we want to do is learning from the past. Now learning from the past, basically what it requires is, let's say, if this is the time frame. So this is the past. This is the present. Now what we need to do is, it's like I need to sort of raise myself above the situation and then move backwards and look at it. It's almost like I am looking at myself from a third person's perspective. Okay, this is what happened over here. This is what I did. This is what this other person did, and this is what happened. But what happens is, if at this very level I try to go back, then here we just get trapped in it, trapped in the emotions. So we need to move forward. Uddhared atmanatmanam natmanam avasadet, Krishna says. Elevate yourself with yourself, don't degrade yourself with yourself. So when we are too close to the memory, then trying to go back just sucks us in. And then we get trapped in it. Then instead of learning from it, we start lamenting it and we start living in it only. So basically, when we are too close to the memory, you can put it this way here. if we are too close, then that memory has a gravity pull that just sucks us in. But when there is sufficient distance, then we can rise above the memory. So basically, when we go here, we are beyond the gravity pull of that memory. Then we can look back and learn from it and decide how to address it. Okay? Thank you. Any last question before we stop? There, you had a question. No.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, wonderful class. Thank you so much. So Prabhu, I think boundaries, and you talked about non-negotiables. So what could be the example of non-negotiable for devotees? Or is it personal?
No, it could be personal also, but for example, actually I'm realizing that this is best done as like a continuous, maybe one day retreat kind of a seminar, because all the points for the future sessions are coming over here. But anyway, it's perfectly fine. So basically, when Dashrath is killed, or Dashrath dies rather, sorry, not killed, then Bharat is called back in emergency and he performed the last rites of his father. And then when he is coming back from the cremation, at that time some of the courtiers accost him because he's going to be the next king, and Shatrugna keeps walking forward. Now when Shatrugna is walking forward, he passes by Kaikeyi's palace, and there he sees that Manthara is walking by, and she is bedecked in expensive clothes and precious jewels, and that is the reward that Kaikeyi has given her. And seeing her, while the whole kingdom is lamenting, seeing her itself makes him angry, but seeing her in that opulent kind of dress, it infuriates her. And he races up to her and catches her and starts shaking her violently. She screams and she calls for Kaikeyi. When Kaikeyi comes running, Kaikeyi says, Shatrugna, stop! Shatrugna just pays no attention to her. And then seeing the commotion, Bharat comes over there. And Kaikeyi runs to Bharat. Bharat, tell Shatrugna to stop. So Bharat doesn't even look at Kaikeyi. He says, Shatrugna, what you are doing right now, I have felt the urge to do the same and more a dozen times over. But, he said, we want to get Ram to come back. And if he is displeased with us, he will not come back. If he hears that we have hurt Manthara or Kaikeyi, he will be displeased with us. So therefore, for Ram's sake, let her go. So basically for us, it's more that we want to please the Lord, or at least we don't want to displease the Lord. Now what does that mean practically for us? It means maybe we have a spiritual master, we have some senior devotee, or we have our own understanding through prayer and our devotional study, that what will please the Lord and what will displease the Lord. So for a devotee, that is the boundary. Okay? Thank you. So thank you very much. Okay, you have a question. Okay.
My question is, from when I've heard Ramayana stories, so Vali, when Sugriva is at the place he's staying, when he ran away, Vali comes often, every single day, I think, and he comes whapping Sugriva in the head, and like with his feet. And so that's what I've heard from my stories. But according to what you said that Sugriva went into this ashram, the sage ashram, and Vali couldn't get inside because the sage had cursed Vali. And so So from compare and contrast of these two scenarios, how was Vali able to kick him in the head, like when he was flying past? If he was
How
under
old
the
are you, by the way?
8.
Okay, it's amazing level of knowledge and clarity in asking a question. Yeah. So, what was the first thing you said? First thing you had heard was Vali. Did you hear the? Yeah, can you repeat? Okay.
Vali normally comes normally every single day, I think, and then comes whapping Sugriv in the head, like doing that kind of with his feet
Oh,
at Sugriv. So I
so you
don't
heard that he
understand.
regularly comes and hits Sugriv
Yeah, in the head.
in the head. Okay. Well, that sounds to me more like a, a dramatic retelling than actual story. It's I'm not sure where the source is, but the Valmiki Ramayana is quite clear that he is safe over there, and that's why when first Sugriv sees Ram and Lakshman, he's suspicious because he thinks, are they assassins sent by Vali? Because they are dressed like sages, but they're carrying weapons. Who are they? So basically, in that area, so it could be that whenever Sugriv comes out of that area, Vali might have hit him like that. But the point is that Vali could not come into that particular area. So that other story, I don't know. I don't think that's at least in the Valmiki Ramayana. It's not there. Maybe it's from somewhere else. Where did you hear it? You have any idea? Yeah. Oh, okay. That's interesting. So it's a dramatic retelling, and some
And
future retelling might be there.
there was also some addition, Prabhuji, that
Okay, so he
when Vali
so
does
he would
that,
hit him on his head, but not hard enough to kill him. No, no. Jump on his head or hit him on his head? Okay. Okay. So how is there a contradiction? See, there are later retellings, and the retellings, as long as they embellish the story, it's like, see, no, okay, it's a good question. So how should I put it that there is Valmiki Rishi tells the story, and his is his original retelling, but that does not mean that one story can, or one narration of a story, or one narration of an incident can describe this incident exhaustively. So there are other subsequent authors who can retell the story and they can give further details. So now, as long as those subsequent retellings, they don't contradict a direct detail in that particular story. If they give some embellishment, some further details, then that's perfectly okay. So it's like there's a main person who is singing, and then when that person is singing, somebody else comes with one instrument, somebody else comes with the second instrument, somebody else comes with third instrument. And if they're all contributing, then that becomes like an orchestra. But if somebody else comes and starts playing an instrument so loudly that the original person's voice only can't be heard, or the original person is singing one song and another person starts singing some other song only completely, then it becomes a problem. So among the various retellings of the Ramayana, there are many retellings which give us further details, which reveal the beauty of the Ramayana more. But there are some retellings which just go completely against not just the spirit, but the spirit and the letter of the Ramayana. So those retellings are not accepted by the tradition. So for example, there's the Jain Ramayana. So the Jain Ramayana is basically that the Jains, they say that throughout his time in the forest, Ram met Jain sadhus. And the Jain sadhus were all giving him Jain philosophy. And finally, when Sita entered into the earth, that time Ram became enlightened and became a Jain. So now that retelling is not accepted by the tradition at all. So there could be further retelling. So I don't think there's any direct contradiction between the two. Did you feel any contradiction?
Yeah, it's just I thought the curse would take effect when Bali came into
Yeah.
that
So the
area.
thing is that both in blessings and curses, there are always loopholes. And there are some people who are always clever at finding loopholes. Like Brahmaji gave a particular blessing to Hiranyakashipu. Narasimha is the ultimate loophole finder, isn't it? So there is a loophole that maybe Wali also exploited. Okay, thank you. So thank you very much. Shri Ramachandra Bhagwan ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Thai Gaur Premanande.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. So this was the conclusion of the part 2 of the 4-part series on balancing forgiveness and justice, lessons from Ramayana. So as Prabhu mentioned, tomorrow's session will be part 3, will be very interesting. We are going to see how Ram dealt with Vali. The title is Karma and Decision Making. So let's express our gratitude and thank His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu by loudly chanting Hari Bol 3 times. Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Also, as you all know, Prabhu has been author for more than 25 plus books. So this time we have 2 new editions. One is the Living Ramayana, Living the Ramayana, which is pretty much some of the topics are covered from this. This is for $7 if you want to buy this on its own. And also there is a Gita Wisdom for throughout the year, 365 quotes from Gita. This is $15, but if you buy together, this is $20 right now. So tomorrow we'll resume at 7:30 sharp. Hare Krishna.
Okay.
I'll schedule a lecture for you. Half an hour lecture from the books. You gotta tell the story what you learned. No, all the kids. You're gonna tell what is here.
Okay.
Then you can make promise.
Yeah.
Okay. You're gonna give lecture on the books. What you read. What you like. What is.
But can it be like when I grow up, or
No.
or does it have to be when I'm young?
No. If you buy now, that's what you have to promise me. You're going to read the book and you're going to go tell the story to kids. I'm going to schedule a
Fine.
meeting.
Sure.
Then pick whatever book you pick. You're going to give 1 hour lecture.
1 hour? No, half an hour.
No, 1 hour.
But then I'll run out
I'll
of
ask
details.
the book is there. You can always pull the information and tell the story.